What do companies need to do to confront the issue of sexual harassment? We have Gillian Tett, U.S. Managing Editor of the Financial Times and a CNBC contributor. Catherine Tinsley is Executive Director of the Georgetown University Women's Leadership Institute and Management Professor at the Business School. And Joanne Lippman is Editor-in-Chief of USA Today. She's the author of the forthcoming book, That's What She Said, What Men Need to Know and Women Need to Tell Them About Working Together. Welcome, ladies, to Power Lunch.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
So it's pretty clear that a lot of these issues have gone on for years, decades. I think a lot of us know why. If you complained, you were never going to work in this town again, you couldn't get hired again, you were going to be a problematic employee. It would be a negative for the reporter, the person reporting it. That has clearly changed. Has it not, Gillian? Is it now safe to say you have been harassed sexually?
Well, I think we certainly are at an extraordinary watershed moment for American society and businesses. And I think every business needs to recognize that the culture is changing and communicate that very clearly to their staff and communicate the new rules of the road. It is never easy to come forward and talk about sexual harassment. Any woman who's ever tried to do that knows the tremendous cost emotionally, personally, and often until now in career terms. But certainly the ability for women to step forward and say this has happened is certainly changing very fast. And frankly, leaders in all fields, not just the media, which has been hit so far, but leaders in all fields need to take note. My prediction is that tech, finance, areas like that could well be sectors that are hit next.
Yeah, no, everybody's waiting for lots more shoes to drop. Joanne, you've got a whole book. What do we need to know about working together as men and women? What do we need to know? And what do you think has changed that suddenly we're at a moment where women came forward and everyone believed them when for years we know that wasn't the case?
So clearly, the line has moved. You know, behavior that was acceptable or winked at for many, many years no longer is. So people are starting to look back at their own history. I think every company and every industry is now reassessing and needs to reassess previous behavior. The real difference, and where I think the watershed movement is here, is all about the men. In the past, women were afraid to come forward because they weren't believed. Now, the big difference is that we have men who are listening, and that is the only way that we're going to make headway. And in fact, the reason I wrote the book, That's What She Said, which is coming out in February, is for that reason, is because women have talked about these issues amongst ourselves for years. And yet there's been no motion. There's been no movement and improvement. We're not going to get any improvement in the situation in closing the gender gap until we have men as part of this conversation. Women talking to each other is only half of a conversation.
Let me join the conversation then. Let me join and why can't you get your book out sooner, Joanne? We need it. Your publisher, you would love it out sooner, right?
I would love it out right this second.
It needs to be out today. Call them, will you? Catherine, let me turn to you. I mean, I don't pretend to speak for all men. This feels to me like a generational moment, a changing in the culture. There are women who have been victimized, and I would say that a lot of men today are scared, because they don't know how to act. They don't know, they know pretty well what's going to get them into real trouble, but in some ways, we don't know how to act. And so companies often rely on standard sexual harassment training that may be on some computer module. Does it work?
So no, actually what a lot of the research shows is that it's a real mixed bag. And you can imagine if you've ever done some sexual harassment training yourself, it's oftentimes rather cartoonish, it can be antiquated, and it can really seem much more like a hassle than anything else.
But you bet. I think that's...
these computer modules, it's
they seem... Yeah.
Right.
It is a question of starting a real organic conversation in the workplace, as opposed to having me go on and complete my whatever it is.
Check the box.
Check the box. I mean,
the bigger issue is really not sexual harassment training. The bigger issue, and the reason we've seen this outcry from women, is less about women who have been physically assaulted at work, and much more about women, every woman knows what it feels like to be overlooked, not heard, interrupted, not respected. And that, I think, is the reason why we've seen such an outcry. You don't have to have been physically assaulted by some guy at work for you to understand how that feels.
And so, Catherine, what are the fixes?
Well, so I think that's one of the things that's really important to get in here, which is that there is a real gradation of these experiences, right? It's not black or white. And so I think that you need to think about any sexual harassment. It's not about sex, it's about harassment. It's a power move, it's about belittling others. And so I think we should treat it the way we treat any other dispute or interpersonal workplace issue.
So, Catherine, we have a lot of corporate executives who are watching. Is there a rule book? Allegation 1, you do what? Allegation 2, you do what?
Right. So this is what I suggest. I think that there's 3 fixes that you could have. First of all, I think, of course, we have to focus on prevention, right, which means having a respectful culture. But if you can't focus on prevention, so what can you do when these things happen? I think that one structural fix that every corporation should institute is something that's called a rule of 2. So one of the reasons why women are sometimes hesitant to come forward is because it's not black and white. It's because something was said, it made them uncomfortable, they're not quite sure, was it harassment, was it not? You know, there might be other people that are also in the room, and so what happens is there's this normalization of this kind of thing. So a rule of 2 is if a woman comes forward, she remains anonymous until another woman also comes forward with an allegation against the same person. Then that triggers some sort of investigation of the incidents. And that's when there can be a larger conversation. And so this would help women to report more often instead of waiting until it gets to a real egregious place. Because oftentimes this isn't, you know, as the man on the show was just, I'm sorry, I forgot your name, was just speaking.
Tyler.
Tyler.
Yes, sorry, Tyler.
Yeah, that's okay.
But as you were just saying, you know, oftentimes men don't know that they are transgressing, and so this can be an opportunity for learning and coaching for everybody. So I think a rule of 2 is a really good thing, and that can be some early prevention. The second thing that I think we ought to do is institute some bystander training. And so this isn't just about if you personally experience something, but if you were part of experiencing something that made you uncomfortable, then that would
Before we get to 3, Catherine, I know you got 3,
Yes.
But I want to bring Jillian back into the conversation here. You know, from a workplace perspective, a corporate perspective, you want to create that environment where women are free to speak up. You want to act very quickly, but there's also the risk of jumping the gun, of maybe acting too swiftly, of maybe creating a witch hunt sort of environment, right?
Absolutely.
Jillian.
I mean, I was going to say, I could not agree more, because I think it's very important right now, while we're celebrating the fact that women have the courage to come forward and this type of punishment is being meted out against people who frankly should have been punished years ago, we have to make sure that companies have a due process. We have to make sure that any institution has a due process. What worries me right now is that there is a danger of this snowballing and spiraling into a witch hunt. And we also have to think about social media. You said earlier, why is this happening now? I think it's partly the political climate is one reason why it's happening now. The other is this extraordinary power of social media to basically let women connect with other women who feel angry and create a snowball effect. In some ways that's good, but there is a danger if we don't have due process and the kind of training and the kind of corporate systems that Catherine's talking about in place, we could see a witch hunt.
You know, Joanne, you and I have been friends a long time. Jillian, you as well. And I've got a new friend, Catherine, here, who is now knows my name, which is great. So Joanne, let me turn to you because Brian, it's okay, man. It's okay. You can jump in at any time, please, anytime, anytime. And I don't want the loud voice, mine, to overwhelm anybody here. It seems to me that there's a behavioral issue, problem that exists in the workplace, but that a lot of this, and I think it was you, Catherine, who mentioned it, and Jillian, I think you did it as well, there's a power imbalance. Yes. And a lot of this seems to me to have to do with a power imbalance and powerful men abusing that power or taking advantage of that power.
That's absolutely right. And first of all, Tyler, thank you for being part of the conversation, because so often when there is this gender conversation, men clam up because they don't know what to say. They're afraid they're going to say the wrong thing. And the first rule is don't be afraid. You need to be part of this conversation. That's how we're going to solve this entire issue. In terms of the power imbalance, that's absolutely correct. That's why we're seeing what we're seeing today. But in terms of just in the general workplace, we really need to be aware at every single level of there is an imbalance between men and women. For example, all the research shows that women are interrupted far more frequently than men, and it doesn't matter at what level of power you have. In fact, there was research done by Northwestern that found that female Supreme Court justices are interrupted 3 times more frequently than male Supreme Court justices.
Those are issues that we're going to have to solve at another time. I just like to,
interrupt.
No, just get rid of rape and all those other things. We will get to interrupting. I interrupt all the time, Joanne. I make up for all those other cases. Ladies, it's been so good to have you. Much appreciated. Jillian, Catherine, and Joanne.
Thank you.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having us.
Good to be here.